I was going to start right, but with us talking a little bit about John Wick. But just before I do, I just this one caught my eye today, and it just made me simultaneously laugh and sort of sigh with like quiet resignation about where we're at today. It's a little article that's been doing the rounds where Jennifer Aniston of Friends fame was getting interviewed, and she was talking about, well, the reception that the show gets nowadays. I could read the highlights of it here, but this one's from Sky News, which is always a bastion of good journalism. She said, Jennifer Aniston says that there's a whole generation who will find Friends episodes offensive. The 54-year-old star, damn, I can't believe she's 54, said in the past that people could joke about what they wanted, but now they have to be very careful, which she said makes it very hard for comedians nowadays. Aniston said that the culture has changed dramatically since the days of the hit sitcom in the 90s and early 2000s. She said that it's become tricky because you have to be very careful, which makes it really hard for comedians, because the beauty of comedy is that we make fun of ourselves, make fun of life. And she's 100% right. And it saddens me because I have got no particular love of Friends as a sitcom. Like, it kind of was a bit before my time, and when I came back to rewatch it later, I was like, it's the most solidly mid, bland, inoffensive comedy imaginable. It's like the epitome of mainstream 90s culture. But even that is apparently now unacceptable. And I just thought, what the hell is left? If you get offended by Friends, where are you at in life?
I remember there was... These stories come around sort of periodically. There was the time when it went up on Netflix. I think all of the episodes went up on Netflix, and there were similar articles written. And the one I think most commonly cited, I think there's an episode in one of the latest series where Chandler's dad is a cross-dresser or something, which is obviously very offensive now. And the fact that they're all very white, very upper middle class, living in very swanky apartments makes them not sufficiently diverse to represent the true nature of the shit reality of living in a big city. So there is that. Yeah, but I mean, the best thing about Friends is watching the edits on YouTube where they've removed the laugh tracks and it's just long, awkward pauses. And it looks like Ricky Gervais has written it instead.
Yeah, because it's that. I don't know how to describe it. It's that really mainstream, really American style of comedy from that 90s period where the humor is just very straight up, very obvious. And whenever I've watched episodes of it, it's like I'm 50% like chuckling occasionally and 50% like irritated by the characters. Like Ross and Chandler just irritate the hell out of me. And I never warm to them. And so, yeah, there's so many aspects of the show that are just like they're dated, but not for the reasons that people would say today. It's not because like the humor is offensive or anything. It's just because I never found it that funny in the first place. But
no,
yeah, the fact that this is now unacceptable, like I don't know, man. Like when you take that out of the equation, and you only use the stuff which is acceptable by today's standards, you end up with shows like Velma. And imagine that. Imagine Velma as the cultural zeitgeist.
Or She-Hulk, both of which were written by a generation of people who grew up watching Friends. So to the extent Friends has got any impact at all on their education as writers, it probably takes them. Like, the one thing I think I would defend Friends as being is that it was kind of an aspirational comedy of the 1990s. This is what every sort of young-ish, soon-to-be professional middle-class person grew up wishing their life would kind of be like. It was larger than life. Their lives all panned out pretty well. Rachel starts as a dead-end waitress job, but manages to make it in a high-flying career. It's comedy for career-minded women, and there's a place for that. Sure, well, but
I mean, did it not kind of popularize the cafe culture in America? Like, because that didn't really exist, like in the 1980s. It was shows like Friends and the 1990s where that took off, and it was like coffee shops became a place that people went to.
I was actually chatting to someone just earlier today saying he had a friend who really hates Friends because it turned a whole generation of people into coffee snobs. Like, you can't just go to have a really shit black Americano, which is basically all I drink of a day. But no, now people actually have to get macchiatos and all things with strange names that I don't understand the meaning of. Yeah, I could see that.
But it's, yeah, I mean, it was representative of its culture, I guess, at the time. And because it became so massive, it kind of shaped 90s culture as well. Like, you know these weird stories about like women wanting the same haircut as Rachel.
Yeah.
That's not going to transform you into Jennifer Aniston, I'm afraid.
But then the sheer number of clone shows as well. So Friends, we can look at now and say, well, Friends was never particularly funny to us anyway. But you can kind of, forgive and forget, except for the fact that almost every sitcom that came out sort of in the late 90s, early 2000s is just mimicking Friends. And so it creates this entire genre or subgenre of television which you can't escape. So you might be lucky enough to grow up in a family where your sister doesn't like Friends, but then she will like Will and Grace. And you just can't get away from it.
Yeah. Well, it's like, the Big Bang Theory was for nerd culture what Friends was for, I guess, just aspirational 20-something culture in the 90s. Again, those shows, like, it just more things, bunch of people set in a couple of different apartments, like, it's all kind of very self-contained, and it's just a bunch of, like, good-looking actors going through these motions. You've got your laugh tracks, you've got all the kind of contrived situations, same premise. Like, I would argue I would hate Big Bang Theory more than Friends just because of what it's done. I think it's invited a whole bunch of like normies into like the whole geekdom of like nerd culture. Just don't like it. But yeah, I think her take on this is just very apt. And it's kind of a sad thing, I suppose, that like we encounter this more and more. And we've talked about it before on previous streams that the new generation is just going to grow up without any like actual fun comedies to enjoy anymore. Like everything that we looked back on and think, yeah, that was a super influential comedy movie, or it was just something that really stuck with all of us. Like we've all been able to have a laugh at it. It's like, yeah, that would never get made now. And you think, well, okay, it's fine for us. We grew up with it, so we remember it. But then there's generations that aren't going to even get exposed to that, or if they do watch it, they'll be offended by it. And you think, my God, like how humorless are they going to be when they grow up?
I think that's the really depressing thing, isn't it? Which is that if you're offended by Friends, like, how do you live? Like, how do you go about your day?
Yeah.
Without, and I wonder how that comes about. What comedies do these people watch, which are so very inoffensive to them? And is it just that they just watch that sort of applause comedy, which isn't there to be funny? It's just there to repeat their own sort of political preconceptions at them and elicit a laugh from the audience. Is that all they watch now? That's because it does seem to be that the majority of stand-up, well, not the majority, but a large number of stand-up comics, for example, have lapsed into that kind of genre. It's just comedy is social affirmation as opposed to comedy to make you laugh, and all the best jokes have to be at somebody's expense, is my approach. But apparently that's now a bad one. That's the origin of the offense, is that...
Well, I think there's no time for laughter when you've got to be an activist and make a better world for everyone through any means necessary. Like,
that comment you highlighted, by the way, that's so true. Only Fools and Horses would drive people nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, yeah, especially the early seasons, because man, there's some risque stuff in there by today's standards.
Staying up late as a kid and seeing that shit come on, like, channel 4 or 5 randomly or something, or BBC One sometimes, but just like you get to, that's like teaching you shit and growing you up and giving you an idea of different kinds of comedy. These days, you'd be lucky if you get to fucking find it. Like they'll trap it in some kind of black hole online, depending on how offensive the episode is at the time,
Aye. Only Fools and Horses, like much like Fawlty Towers, like that 1970s, 1980s period of British comedy, like it's just an absolute classic. And I will say as well, it's like the most, how could I even put it, like well-meaning show that I can think of. Like there's absolutely no ill intent behind any of the comedy in that. It's just reflective of its time, but then there's a reason it's become...
thing, like that whole subgenre of comedy created by Graham Linehan, Father Ted, IT Crowd, I think was one of his as well.
I love IT Crowd.
There's Black Books in particular, which is one of my favorites. They're kind of anodyne. They're not particularly offensive. They don't set out to offend people. But, their creator gets absolutely wiped from the face of the internet for saying some politically unwise things, but having had the misfortune of previously attacking people who were free speech absolutists, so nobody came to his defense. But they've all gone as well, and they are bland and roughly inoffensive, and usually just quite generic good fun. We don't get very many of them either.
Yeah. He actually made a really good apology to Count Dankula when he was getting roasted. He was like, yeah, I didn't understand the context, and now that I've seen how quickly people can turn on you, I've come to appreciate your plight, sir. So I'm sorry.
If Friends has told us anything, though, is as we're all being marched off to the gulag for liking, good comedies, all you really need to do is put a laugh track over that, and it becomes funny. So, we can bring that back.
I think for a lot of these people, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but the thing they fear most is mockery, because when you can mock their worldview or whatever, it suddenly makes you extremely dangerous, because you can undermine the very fabric of their arguments and expose them for how stupid they are.
Is that Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin's thing? The only proper response to unintelligible propositions is ridicule, and it's been true as long as we've been around. Yeah. This is the reason any social position, any social politic, any government which wants to maintain itself in power, the first people who tend to go by the wayside are satirists, because humour fundamentally just exposes the lie beneath the thing.